Hi, welcome to You Didn't Get the Memo show. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. And as always, we have an exciting show for you today. I want to, first of all, welcome all of you that are tuned in. As you know, You Didn't Get the Memo show streams live on both YouTube, Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. Got a great show for you today, and especially since a lot of the children are going back to school. And one of the things that I was hoping that we could kind of focus on is the national epidemic that's plaguing education in the United States. And the question becomes probably for all of you, I know for me, is why the education system here in the U.S. is it failing? Is it not? With over 4,000 accredited institutions that make up just the U.S. higher education in the United States. So we want to talk with my guest today, who is Dr. Dee Haney. And she's just not another advocate. She's not just an author or coach and a speaker, but she is experienced in transformational personal and leadership development coaching. And so Dr. Haney received her PhD and her master's degree in public administration and criminal justice from Walden University. And she has a Bachelor of Applied Science degree from Mercer University in organizational leadership and criminal justice. So I would say, reading that in her background, she is suited for her role and what it is that she does. And I'm going to let her talk about her backstory. And so I'd like to welcome to the show Dr. Haney. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Miss Gloria. I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
All
Hello.
right. All right. So, Dr. D, you heard me say that, in my opinion, again, this is my opinion, that there's an epidemic as it relates to education here in the U.S. And I wanted to talk about that. And so let's just start with you telling our viewers a little bit about who you are. What's your backstory?
Okay, well, I am Dr. D, as affectionately known, but I am Dr. Deatrice D. Haney, and I just go by D. And I don't get caught up on the title or the rank or anything like that, but I am grateful for it. However, I am from Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, where I have seen the transformation in my city, in my state, pretty much. And so, with that being said, I have always just had I'll say not a passion, but it's a call, as I like to say, working with children. And so I'm the youngest of a blended family, and I do adore that so much. And they have taken me as their literally little sister to make sure that I progress in life and to be able to stand strong on my values that my mother, my father, as well as my maternal grandmother taught me. And so, with that being said, I've always been about community because watching my grandmother and my mom and my aunts, it's just always been about community. It's not about the name recognition or anything of that sort. It's just been all about community. And with that being said, watch my dad work in the school system in a foreman role. I was exposed to all of that to see the children, to see the schools, and to see what's going on. And so I guess that played with me as I matriculated in my life as well as in my education. And so my fundamentals and my roots are church. And I'm not ashamed to say that. And so teaching Sunday school, teaching children, teaching adults, teaching teenagers, even my peers at that point, I just got into it. And so it was something that just came natural for me. And so, but at the same time, I've always had an interest in just trying to develop and help others, so to speak. And so,
Mhm.
with that being said, working with first-time mothers, volunteering in that space, and then having the opportunity to become a chair of a board that deals with children who are unfortunately abused and neglected. And
Mm.
so, being a chair and being a volunteer at that pace, and then transitioning to a chair, it really broadened my perspective on how our children are in the system, so to speak, or even in a desolate situation as that. And sometimes the foster care system, we look at it as being a negative, but sometimes that foster care system is a safe haven for our children. And I like to say our children because they are our children, regardless if they're biological or not, they are our children. And so I look at that, and so that's what brings me to this point now of being where I am now, and fortunate and blessed to be in the capacity of serving on the Clayton County Board of Education.
Yes. Come on now.
And so that brings me to that. And so everybody knows I'm going to change the story and I'm going to change our narrative in Clayton County Board of Education
All
Public
right. Well, come
Schools
on then. Come
because
on.
it's such a negative that has played. Because yes, we did lose accreditation, but we regained it. So nobody wants to talk about that part. Nobody
Right.
wants to talk about the regaining of that and what we had to go through. And though I wasn't on the board, I was a community citizen, and I'm a
Hmm.
citizen, and I live in the county. So it had an impact on me, not necessarily directly because I do not have children, but I do have 52K now that
Yeah.
I've inherited. And so therefore I had to go and I said, I want to do something more. Because when I was the chair of Clayton County, of the CASA that is, of Clayton County Juvenile Court, those same children are in the district. So I had a way of serving them indirectly in that role. And now I serve them in the role that I'm in now. And so I'm very fortunate to be in this capacity. And I'll just give you a little story on something. In 2016, I ran for office. I did not win, but I did win. And I say that to say because I want children, especially little girls who look like me, I want them to understand that you don't allow defeat to get to you. You keep pressing on and keep doing what you have to do without the name recognition. And so I look at that and I look at that as an experience. And God had to test me to see if I really wanted what I wanted at this point, even through a pandemic. And so here I am now, and I'm grateful for my citizens in District 5, in which I serve, but I serve the entire county when it comes to our children. So this is just a little bit about OD from Cascade, Southwest Atlanta, Jonesboro. Hey, that's where I am.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's just kind of roll back for just a minute
Okay.
because one of the things you already answered it was what was the impetus behind you running for a seat on the school board, and you basically led into that without even knowing that that's what I was going to ask you. And also, what I love that you said, what I heard was that you're about being a catalyst for change because we know, and I know that I have heard here on the West Coast that Atlanta, given the opulence and the wealth that's there in that area, our Black and brown children are, they still are not getting the education that a lot of them need when it comes to public schools. And the other thing in just talking with you prior to deciding that, okay, I think that we can do a show and talking with you was, a lot of parents, and I want all parents to understand this, just because you can afford to send your kids to a private school and what you feel maybe is a better education, you still have a responsibility. You're still paying tax dollars into the school system. And I feel that it's also up to all of us. It's not just, those that are disenfranchised that we should worry about, but it's all of us that probably should participate in raising that level of education. And I love what you said. Those children in the foster care system, we hear stories time and time again of those kids who some made it out and they rose up. And you know what? We want to change that narrative. And you talking about increasing and building up and lifting up these children. And so I love that about you. So I wanted to just kind of try to encapsulate all of that because I can tell the both of us, look, we only have 55 minutes. So we got a lot of stuff that we need to get through, right? I do want to say to the viewers, you guys have questions for my guests, please put them in the comment section because this is interactive and we'll do our very best to respond to you. So Dr. D, what in your opinion, are your thoughts on the decline of teachers in this profession? Because I can't turn the TV on without hearing about how many open positions there are. And so what are your thoughts around what's happening with there being such a decline in teachers besides just burnout? Because you know what, I don't know about anybody else, but I know even for me with my own grandkids, I'm like, whoo, after about a few hours, I'm ready for your parents to come and get you, right? So you can imagine a school teacher who's managing some of the kids that probably have different a different set of issues, so to speak. ADD, you've got kids who just aren't disciplined, kids who acting out. So, but there has to be something because this didn't just happen overnight. The pandemic just brought it to the forefront. But in your opinion, what are your thoughts on the decline of teachers in the teaching profession?
Well, you said it. It's just that we have to look at mental health because I think that, teachers have gotten to the point where, and I've had conversations with teachers of like, what is it? When we're trying to recruit, because Clayton has a decline as a teacher retention, and we're in the spot of trying to recruit um, qualified professionals to come back into the school, as well as get new talent that's out there. And so what it has been is we already know, let's just go ahead and address it. Money for one. Okay. And of course, you want the money to meet what you're going through. You want the money to meet the demand as of what you're facing these children. And just what you spoke on is just a part of that, where this teacher is really the advocate, is the mother, is the father. They're all encompassing all of those roles while trying to manage at least 15 to 25 students in a classroom. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to look at that. That's a mental stress on a teacher.
Right,
Because not only that, they got to deal with their own child as well, if they have any. And
right.
get this here, talking with teachers during the fight of the pandemic, it wasn't a matter they did not like the profession. It's just that whatever came with it, in addition to, now you have a new dynamic. I'll speak for Clayton. Here it is now. We have to create now an online academy. So
Mm,
that's a different dynamic. And so now you're going through variations as to how can we now change the structure without disrupting the curriculum. And so now we have to maneuver how we do things now, because now the pandemic has given us a wake up call. And now it's like now you're dealing with that. And also you have to look at too, you said some great points. But now we have all this, and let's just be real. Our students are carrying guns and weapons. I mean, the safety of our teachers, of our staff, of our children that's in that school. And so you look at that right there, because it all has a curtailing effect, not only on the teachers, but our bus drivers, our nutrition, everybody that's involved with that big ship as of making that thing smoothly sail. And
mm,
so what I look at, the decline of that is mental health, dealing with all the variables that they have to deal with. That child, like you said, who is suffering from that ADD, my special gems, I don't like to call them special needs. They're gems and jewels to me. And so when you're dealing with that dynamic, and then you're trying to man this classroom as well as man the curriculum and do what's required as a teacher, as an educator, that's stress on you. And so now teachers are like, no, I don't have to do this. And I can go to another district that's going to pay me for what I have to go through, let alone a district that's not going to compensate me for what I have to deal with. So we have to look at, where does the scale really weigh and how much weight does that really
right.
weigh? And so we have to be really empathetic with our teachers and understand their backdrop and know that we're there with you, we're there to support you. And so what we tried to do in Clayton to boost that up and to draw in that talent, we have now changed our budget, where we're now allowing steps, as you speak. I mean, as levels, to help
Mm,
them to get to that point, to retain them and to recruit them, to give them the bonuses, to give them those incentives, to let them know not only do you deserve it, but we appreciate you. And
mhm.
so we've not only done that for just the educators, we've done that for those who are in the classified, non-classified areas, such as the transportation, such as the nutrition, all of those areas there. So we look at everybody as a totality, and that goes as to what you mentioned. You and I had a discussion on the inclusive part of it.
Right.
Nobody's excluded. And
Yeah.
so we want them to understand that. And so that's why I see it's just the mental health of everything, just having that same conversation. And the theme I've extracted from teachers I've spoken to is just the mental health part of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really something. And by the way, you're absolutely correct. I spoke with another potential guest, and one of the things, the terms that is not used is special needs. That is a no-no. You can say disability, but you don't use the word special needs. For any of you guys out there, when you're saying I have a special needs, or somebody say you're special need, no, you just have a child with a disability. So thank you for bringing that out. And so when we talk about the barriers, you talked about the mental health issue, which is so huge. And it's amazing that it has taken this pandemic to just really like open up Pandora's box, so to speak, because teachers have been dealing with this for a very, very long time. At the same time, you talked about the lack of, to me, overcrowding in classrooms, that just has to stop. There is no way conceivable that anybody can teach when you got 25, 30, 35 kids in a classroom. I don't care what anybody says. And it's at, it has to start at the top. So it's good to know that there is someone that's on the school board that you're cued into that, and you understand that. And so when we talk about educational equity, what comes up for you?
Fairness. I need to see fairness
Mhm.
because I look at them as good. When I look at the other districts and the other areas
Right.
outside of the south side, and they go to the
Right.
west side, I mean, you can see that that's is not fair. Let's just keep it 100. Okay, it's not fair.
Yeah,
My
keep it
children down,
100.
yeah, we
That's
just gonna
why
keep it
you're
100.
here.
I'm Dr. D, y'all. So have them cascade. But I just don't see that fairness with our children as of the resources. Why does it take so long for my children down here in my area, as well as in rural areas, to get the access that they need to learn? Why does it take a teacher have to go through nails and bricks to get the resources that they need to teach our children? But yet again, in the other districts, they can readily get it just like that. And so I just look at that and say, wow, where is that line of where everybody has equitable distribution of resources? And I don't see that. Why is it that my children have to get less than and you get more than? So Clayton is changing that because we're making sure our children get top notch. And so we are, and we want them to understand this is top notch because when I'm looking at a budget, it's top notch, So I look at that, I just look at that as being it should be fair across the board,
Mhm, mhm.
regardless of your socioeconomic background, everything like it shouldn't even matter. Because 9 times out of 10, that same child up in that area has to come down to my area. Some type of way they're going to meet in the
Mhm.
middle and they're going to share the same type of mindset, maybe different, but it's going to have the same kind of theme as a learning curriculum. That's
Right.
what they learn in school. So I
Yeah.
just see equity. It should just be fair across the board with all resources available. That means shared resources.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
all it is.
Yeah. So you again, once again, you answer, because one of the things was when I talk about educational equity, but also what causes educational inequity, and you actually, talked about that. So, folks over here, at the end of the day, there's going to be crossing the boundaries, and
Mhm.
it should be across. I think back growing up, and when my with my children, there were certain schools that were touted as though they're better public schools, and so people were moving their kids to the better schools and not the schools that were in the hood, so to speak, right?
Mhm.
And that just always bothered me, because it's like all kids should be taught the same thing, and the resources should be equitable across the board, and those are the things, and that's what we're talking about. And so, listen, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to give you a minute to catch your breath, and we're going to talk about, in your opinion, how you would rank the education that our children, I should say, our Black and brown children are receiving on a scale of 1 to 10. We talk about keeping it real. And for those of you who are just now tuning in, you didn't get the memo. It's about providing you, the viewer, with relevant, fact based, mainstream information to help you be informed and make informed decisions. And that's why we keep it real. So, you guys don't go anywhere. Queue up your questions. We'll be right back.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it. Gonna get it, gonna slip it, gonna cuff it. Check it, talk to doctor and share it.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. High blood pressure silently affects millions of Americans. Staying on top of your blood pressure is as simple as these 4 easy steps. Self-monitoring is power. Visit manageyourbp.org to learn more.
All right. If you guys are just now tuning in to You Didn't Get the Memo show, I'm just going to tell you, you already missed the best 15, 20 minutes of it already. So you got to go back and watch the show from start to finish. We're here with Dr. D. Haney. And Dr. D, before we went to break, I asked you this question. I just want you to rank the education system. Now, I already have an idea what you're going to say because, look, you're already answering whatever questions that I have for you ahead of time. But I just really I want to encapsulate when we talk about our Black and Brown children, how would you rate or rank the education that our children are receiving?
I will give it a between a 7 and an 8. And the reason being is because there's always room for growth. It's because I've stated before, we need the resources to make sure they're continuous. Because like you said before, we are in a changing time now. We're in a pandemic. We're still in a pandemic. And so therefore you can see where things are beginning to be a little scarce, but they're coming back. And so I will rank that for our Black and Brown children. I think that they're receiving a 7.58. It could, there's always room for growth, and it's not to discount any of our administrators, our teachers, our superintendents. It's not that. It's just the way the life is now. Federal government and federal funding is preventing a lot of that. Why would you take a CTA program in Georgia and slice it? I'm looking at the laws that's been here in Georgia. You slice a CTAE program, but now you see the need for a nursing program because of the CTAE. Because of the pandemic. And so you want to increase and give an incentive to that. So why not have that all across the board? So all students don't just cut it when you see their Black and Brown children are pretty much benefiting from it. And so that has an effect on how I rank it, totality of it, whether from elementary all the way up to high school. And so I would give it I'll lean towards an 8, but there's always room for growth in those areas because of the funding that's not being equitably distributed to us.
Right. Okay. Say that word. We'll hear that word a lot this evening.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about performance indicators for education and the outcomes of that. Do you get really involved with that? I would assume that you would. So what does that look like as it
Well,
relates to performance indicators?
well, our performance indicators, what I'm looking at right now, our chair is giving us some extensive training on this. But also our performance indicators for a board state is to look at those test scores. And those test scores dictate a whole lot. It may not tell the entire story, but it gives us an outline of what's really needed. Where are our challenges at? Where are our celebrations at? And so there's always room for growth. As you know, any grade level, third grade is the most integral year for a child. And so therefore we're trying to increase those grades. And I'm going to be very open and very accountable for this. Ours are not what we need it to be. And we can't keep blaming the pandemic. We're not blaming the superintendent. We're not blaming anyone. That's just the way the world is at this point. And so I believe our children got a little comfortable with the pandemic, but at the same time, our performance indicators are just that, are our test scores. And so therefore I tell my teachers, I said, you don't have to tell me what's going on in the school.
Right.
I'll see it anyway. So I look at that, and that's how I gauge. And I'm like, okay. And then we as a board collaboratively come together to see how we can help the superintendent. How can we address these gaps and these challenges, and then celebrate those good points? And
Right.
so, with that being said, then we begin to even go a little further, Ms. Gloria, as to what subjects can we really pound on. We know that it's the science. We know that it's the math that's really integral.
That's right.
But what about the reading? My child needs to know how to read in order to get to a STEM program. So that plays a part. My kindergarten needs to know how to pronounce and have those enunciations of words even at that age because of the speed of technology at this point. And so we look at all of those factors, and it's an eye opener for me because I'm a teachable and learnable person. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, I didn't know they do all of this. And so what I look at, and I dig into not only just the budget itself, I look at those performance indicators as we're looking at schools and seeing where we can address those gaps and seeing where we can capitalize on those celebrations. And so as the totality of it, it's just really our performance indicators for the schools.
Oh, okay. So that brings up a question. I actually had this dialogue with my barber, and we were talking about, he was saying that you just said the word they need to be able to read. And his thing is now with technology, you've got things that'll read for you. And I was saying that there still needs to be a comprehension. And even if you can press a button and something read, you need to be able to comprehend. And all of that comes with reading. It's not just, the words, it's the reading of the words, it's the understanding of the words, it's the placement of the words, it's a comprehension of the words as well. So, and the thing that he said, which I thought was interesting, and I figure I'll pose it to you, is that a lot of the schools, there's this belief that you don't keep a student behind in a grade, even though they're not performing or they're not meeting the criteria, that schools are being told that you pass that student on for a number of reasons. One, you've got other students that are coming in and you've got a much older student in the same classroom. It's also somewhat demeaning to that child. So what are your thoughts, and is any of that happening in Clayton County as it relates to a child that's not meeting uh, just the minimum, the bare minimum, and they're being passed along? Is that
Well,
happening? And what's
I'm
the
sure
thing
I'm
around
sure it does because I don't get involved with the day to day, but I'm sure that it does.
it?
But
Okay.
going back to that point, it enables a child. When you're doing that, you're an enabler to that child. My nephew, I'll just be totally honest with you, my middle nephew, he has challenges in reading. And so my niece, which is his mom, she took it upon herself because she's like any mother. She's gonna stand right there and watch you and make sure you do what you're supposed to do. And that it goes back to home. First of all, that teacher is having communication with that parent or guardian. And so therefore it can close a gap right there to say, hey, we need little Johnny to be able to get on speed. This is some of the areas in which he needs. And so that would try to help curtail some of the retaining of that child, of having that remedial. I don't want my child to be, as we said back then, kept back, but it's remedial, to prevent that. So I think it starts with having that communication with the guardian, the parent, to better try to be preventative in that step rather than them be, I say being proactive rather than being reactive in that step.
Mhm.
And so with that being said, a child going back to the barber and reading barber, a child needs to know how to read. I have my little Mason. I said, Mason, my nephew, because I have all these nephews, y'all. Okay, boys. I said, I want you to read a book. Let's go tradition. Read a book to me. Read
Mhm.
the words in a book. And so he didn't understand that first. And then when he saw that one of his classmates did get kept back, so to speak, he saw the importance of that. But I always say it has to start from home. And so when that teacher
Yeah.
had that communication to say, hey, Miss Gloria, we got Choo Choo over here. She needs to get it. This is what she's having her points of struggle here. Help
Mhm.
me to help her so I can help you as well.
Mhm.
So it has to be a two-way conversation. It has to be two-way, even though the bottom equation is the child. And so
Mhm.
I just feel like I'm probably sure it does happen in my district. I'm sure it happens in our district. I'm sure. But there are different resources available that Clayton has to help that child, to help that mom, to help that dad, to help that grandmama, to help them to be able to help that child. And
Mhm.
so I just believe that there's no excuse for it. Children learn at different paces. I'm a slow learner when it comes to math. But I can look at a budget and tell you what's going on there. Don't get
Right.
that twisted. But at the same time, I knew my struggles and I knew that my dad took an interest in saying, let me make sure she's getting right with math. And
Mhm.
so I look at that and I said, okay, but it took a parent to talk to the teacher. And I think sometimes because of the rules and laws have prevented parents from doing so much as a parent, it kind of has an effect. Well, it does have an effect on the child because at one point when we were growing up, before you looked up, your mom's still on the top in the hallway. You're like, what are you doing here?
Right.
Because of that involvement. And also, I want to speak on how we can help that and to prevent that. As parents get involved with your PTA, get involved with the PTA. I can't stress it enough. Get involved with the PTA. PTSA, now they have it. And they provide the resources to help our children and to help them as well. And so I just think that remediation for children it can be prevented.
Yeah. Well, you said a number of things there, and it is true. Parents, you are not alone. That's the important thing. You talk about your parents. My mom lived in the school. If it's something we didn't understand, she gonna talk to the teacher until they make sure that we do understand it, right?
Right.
But you just said something else, and that's we're gonna delve more into that about parent involvement. And I
Mhm.
just want to say, I hear so many parents say, "Well, my job won't let me off." Listen, that's why you have PTO. That's why,
Mhm.
and see, that's not for when you just don't feel like going to work. It's for these particular things, right? And
That's
so,
right.
and you cannot be denied that. So people need to understand that. And if you're really, 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 and I'm not saying that you aren't parents, but when you are really entrenched with your child's education, you will make it a point. You can tell your boss, I'm going to be an hour late getting in today because I'm going to my kid's school. I got to leave an hour early. And it's not about you asking permission. See, sometimes we just got to like stand up and say, this is what I'm going to do, right? Allow your boss to work with you, but at the same time, y'all, it's time out. Our kids, I'm sick and tired of hearing the narrative that our black and brown kids are failing, and they just clump them all together, and they're really not failing. But it's only in those underserved areas where there's not equity, and they are not getting what they're supposed to get, that we're talking about. But Dr. D, we had a question from one of the viewers. They wanted to know, is today's education the current version for redlining like housing inequities or
I
any?
would say it is. I would say it is because, like I said before, you have it up in the good part, like you just said. They have it, but
Mm-hmm.
then when it's time for us to get it, why we have to go through so much red tape to get what we need?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we have to give you 50 documents and they only give you two? Why do we have to show so much and then you
Right.
extract that and then you want to say, oh, you all are a Title One county? Do you really know why Title One? People think, oh, because it's a high poverty area. That's not it. Because now Clayton has now changed the narrative where now the income has increased. So we're still tier one. Let's just get that real. And I'm just being honest, that's just economic development. We're still a tier one county, but the income drive has increased. And I think with that question being said, yes, it is. It's just a facade of it. It's like a filter of it saying that it's not, but it is because the areas that consider the low, even not just within the metro, but even in our rural areas, why should they can't even get broadband.
Mm.
I mean, and that's a challenge that I can't wrap around my head that you can't get them broadband. We just went through a major, major part of a pandemic, and they're still having struggles where they can't get broadband. I mean, and I look at that. Why should? But you talk about we want to serve our children. How can you not? I just it just blows my mind. But to answer the question,
Okay. Well, the other comment to the conversation is as things come in, it was about holding the kid back, and Mr. Rogers says when you don't uphold the standards, we're doing that child a disservice,
right.
and I so agree with that, and we have to understand that children learn at different paces. Some kids, I was never that kid that you could yell at me, and of course I came along when they wrap your hand or you know, whoop you with a strap or those kinds of things. Y'all, those times and those days are out. And different kids have different modes of learning, right? And it was interesting. A teacher made a rap video. And he's talking, I think it was calculus or something, and all the kids knew the words, and they were like, oh, that makes sense. So it's meeting the students where they are as well. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying teachers, you need to go out and everybody become a rapper. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that you have to find out, and that's part of digging into and really understanding your students and what their likes and dislikes are, and really trying to embrace them, their parents, and understand, because I can't teach your child if I don't understand what it is that they need. And by the way, y'all know kids don't learn if their bellies are growling and
That's
they haven't
right.
had food to eat or they don't have a lunch and those kinds of things. So let me see, that's why I'm an advocate of all kids should just have uniforms so nobody looks any different, right? You can't tell the poor kid across the track versus the kid who lives, in a more affluent area. Just put them in uniforms and be done with it. And I know, look, y'all don't write me and beat me up for that, but I just think that that's so important. And Dr. D, we have let me show this is kind of long, but this viewer says, thanks for speaking about parent involvement. It really starts at home. Schools should be reinforcing a child's learning. Parents have become dependent on schools to educate. The pandemic showed us that we have to be more proactive. Thank you so much for that, because that is absolutely true. And I'm just saying, y'all, look, if you're going to have kids, I always said, that's a 25 to life sentence. You got to get them through there. And I mean, and what I mean by that, you just don't send them to school, because that's part of the problem in schools is the teachers having to try to discipline and deal with a child that didn't get any of that at home. And so, yeah, look, take those cell phones away from them and give them some educational tools. So we could go on and on
Absolutely.
about that. But
Absolutely.
Dr. D, let me ask you this. Let me transition, and let's talk about the goals for your particular district in relations to equity and inclusion. How are you measuring these goals, and how could an equitable classroom environment be created?
Well, the equitable, I'll get back to the measuring part, but the equitable environment is just making sure that we as a board make sure that budget is really tight, where every school, every teacher has the resources to support their curriculum. We can't have one third grade section of this type of part of the county to have this type of material, and the other part on the other south side of the county have less than. And so we want to make sure that the funding is there for one. That's how we do that, to ensure that. And so we make sure that they're receiving the top notch, and we're making sure not only the top notch, but is it really a point where these students can really learn and benefit from it, not only from just this grade level, but can it carry them through their matriculation of schools while they're in school, that is. And so how do we measure that part of it? Right now, the board sits, it's really for the district. So the board, we're not involved in day to day. And
Hmm.
so the board looks at it from a lens and say we're observing because we want to know what you all are, what you all are doing. And
Hmm.
so now they have, we had just started our DE&I, and we did the equity piece of it. That's what we're really digging into, the equity piece of it, and understanding that some parts of our county are high poverty. Some parts of our county have a more um, populated area of certain um, cultures of their background, ethnicities of theirs. So we have that. So you're dealing with all the different dynamics. And then we have to look at, we were just in a study where we were just analyzing some data with Clark Atlanta University with they're in their equity piece of their business over there at the school. They help us to be able to dissect those variables as to how we look at measuring our students. And so our chair was really bringing out a point about how we categorize our children. We say they're at risk. Children are not at risk, they just need special attention a little
Hmm.
bit more than others. And so
Right.
when you place a child at risk, now you're being inequitable because now you want to stereotype the child. And so
Yeah.
when you stereotype the child, it goes back to the uniform. If the child was the same uniform, they wouldn't know you came from the rough side of the mountain versus those who come from the rich affluent
Right.
areas.
Right. Right.
And so we try to break that down and say, no, don't do that. But then we said, okay, then we had a conversation on how can we better suit that need? And okay, well, let's look at it like this. How do we break that down? Well, let's look at suspensions. Let's look at those areas and those points where how many students or what is that child a repetitive person that gets suspended? Is that child? Then you start looking at the dynamics. I'm just looking at D per se. D, you look at these behaviors, can that attribute to why we're doing what we're doing? And
Hmm.
what resources can we provide to the district based off what we've seen when we see a high number in this particular area? And
Right.
so we're working through that. And so now we actually have a training coming up on that, and then I'm going through a training for equity and governance. So I'll be learning more about it and how we can best perform at our pace to be fair across the board. So Park Atlanta, shout out to them. They're helping us as well. The superintendent has allowed the autonomy for that department to be able to delve deeper into that. And so it's still new. And so we're just looking at it, but we want to make sure that every student is treated the same, regardless. Even though they learn and behaviors are totally different, they're still the same because they're getting the education that's across the.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. D, this is, I mean, oh man, this is, as they say, this is some good stuff, all right? But look, we need to take another quick break. And when we come back, let's talk about what the missing ingredients are for things like student engagement, teacher and parent engagement. And guys, keep your questions and comments coming. We appreciate them. You are tuned in to the You Didn't Get the Memo show. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray, with my awesome guest, Dr. D. Haney. We'll be right back, guys. Don't go anywhere.
Even though we didn't grow up together, he's my favorite brother.
Hey, sis.
I'm the baby of the family, and he's the gentle giant.
What you know about Port Georgia?
Man, please, that's a classic.
You know when they say people are a rare breed? Yeah, he's that.
I'm sorry, I'll be back in a few hours.
Don't worry, Shug. You know I'm for you.
I know.
Go get the football.
That was my favorite memory. He was always for ya. This is a true story of me, Bridget Floyd, and this guy, George Perry Floyd Jr., my big brother.
When I was growing up, my mom was extremely tidy. We were trained to put things back where we got them from. One day, when I walked into my mom's house, I felt like I walked to someone else's house. There was stuff everywhere. And just growing up the way I grew up and to see this transition was very alarming.
When Sean talked to me, it was a wake-up call, and that's when I went to the doctor.
All right, you guys, thank you so much for hanging in here with me and my awesome guest, Dr. D. Haney. And we are basically just, trying to wrap our arms around, I should say, I am, is talking about the education system and, the epidemic that seems to be plaguing our education system here in the United States. And before we went to break, I posed this question to Dr. D, and it was, what are the missing ingredients? Let's start with, for better student attendance rate and graduation rate. So let's start there. Is there a missing ingredient that we need and that parents and teachers need to be aware of?
Yeah, the missing ingredient is communication for one. To get that graduation rate up, like I said, we talked about this before, there has to be some communication ahead of time, proactive communication. And when counselors reach out to the parents to let them know, teachers reach out to parents to let them know what's going on with that child, then it's the responsibility of that parent and guardian to say, okay, let me get on board here to make sure that my child is where they're supposed to be so they can graduate. Don't wait till graduation's in May in Clayton. Don't wait till April and think that you can get all these classes in that you should have gotten in when school started in August. So you look at that. So I think the missing ingredient that would be communication and continuum of communication to make sure, like you said, your mom was at school all the time, make sure everybody knew who you all were, and to make sure that school work was going to take care of. And I think sometimes we go, just keep it real. We got to go back to the basics.
Yeah.
Like if I can see you at the football games, if I can see you at the school as much as I see you at the football games, we'd be right there. We'd be right there. But when I don't see that, and when I just see you at the time where you want to call me, bypass the superintendent and call me, and say, how can I can't do that at this point because my thing is, were you talking to them prior to?
Mm-hmm.
The resources are there. You can't say the resources are not there. The resources are there. There's communication going out every day. This is what we have to provide for our students. This is what we have. This is what you can tap into. And so I just think that the communication sometimes get lost in the sauce a little bit.
Yeah.
At the same time, it has to be two-way. But that parent wants to be involved with that child, and that counselor, that teacher stays involved with that parent.
Yeah, it's a two-way street, and I'm pretty certain it's pretty much the same way in Clayton County. But I think most school districts now, because of technology, parents are able to go online and look at their kids,
Absolutely.
their grades, look at what assignments are missing, and that just has to be a thing. Just like you set your I don't know if people do DVRs anymore, whatever, but whatever you set your alarm to, you've got to do that same thing for checking on your child. It shouldn't even go 30 days or 60 days. That should be something that you should be doing twice a month at least, and finding out where they are. So it's not a shock, and you calling the teacher up and being all upset. And the reality of it is, it takes two. And when I say two, the parent and the teacher, to stay on top of that. But teachers can only do so much. They are not the parent. And so I think that we have to think about that. But then the next question is the missing ingredient, then, as it relates to, and I think we already covered this, as it relates to parents, because I see one of the viewers said it requires parent participation and engagement. And I'm just saying, give you a shout out, because that is so very, very true. But from the perspective of the teacher, and I know a lot of teachers, I had kids whose teachers made sure every week I had a regular call in with them from every class, so I knew how my child was performing. But then the difference is, I was, and I was really committed to my child getting an education. And by the way, y'all hear me say this all the time, the chicken and the pig. The chicken was involved because it gave you an egg, but the pig was committed because he was poor. We have to understand, are you just involved, or are you committed?
All
And
right.
involved means making sure they just go to school and show up. But when you're committed, you're checking grades, you know what's happening, you know if they miss school, if they're skipping class, and all of these different things. So look, did I say enough about that?
No, I like that part because it just resonated with me when I was on the first day of school. I went and visited some schools, and I touched on some of my elementary schools. I touched on some of my middle schools, and I touched on some of my high schools. And so I was looking at that, and I commend our Black brothers, like men, who are coming up and stepping up. And when I saw that dad, and I saw several dads, mom was there, but I saw several dads take the charge and say, let me make sure that their registration's in place. Let me make sure they get to class on time. And then I saw one of them out right in the parking lot, just laid the rule down. You know how parents just say, when we get in this store, you better not touch nothing. But when you get in this school, you better act like you got some sense. That's exactly what he said. And I like that, to the point where they took that. That was the part right there. I was on that. That's, I'm as we say in the streets down here, I was ear hustling without eavesdropping. So, but nevertheless, I love that part, and that showed, like you said, the commitment
Yeah,
for involved. And
yeah.
so I looked at that and I said, that's a dad that's involved with his child. Because at the same time, who wants to have to just keep jumping off work for foolishness when
Hmm.
you can be doing what you're supposed to be doing?
Right, right.
And the time that I'm taking off is the time you taking away from me going on vacation with you. I mean, you have to look at it in that
Yeah,
perspective. And
yeah.
so that goes back to that point. Are you involved or are you committed? And I
Right.
think sometimes you can put up that you can drop a child off, but are you really committed? Did that parent, did that teacher see you enough to know, hey, that's the story. How she come up here every time. You want that type of reputation. Yeah, I'm up here all the time. The door open. I'm up here.
That's right.
And so I think sometimes that gets, and the school makes it welcoming for parents to do so. And like you said, the accessibility of having grades online. I mean, I'm kind of glad they didn't have that back in my day. Yeah, but at the same time, I still got it because my dad worked for the school system. So it's just like,
Right.
pretty much when grades were coming out, but at the same time, I think there should be a level of accountability for everybody,
I
especially
agree.
parents, in that regard.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree.
Right.
And I used to ask my kids all the time, is there anything that I need to know that's not going to be a surprise to me? Because if it's a surprise, we're going to have a problem. And that was the reality, is, just what we had to live with. But I'm happy to hear you say that. So, Dr. D, we're going to take, and when I say a really, really, really quick break, we're going to take a really, really, really quick break. And when we come back, I'd just like to have your opinion, on what your thoughts are. And students should have a voice, um, within the school system, and if so, to what degree? And I'll tell you my thoughts, around why I ask you that question when we come back. So, guys, keep your comments coming. I appreciate it. We're here with Dr. D. Haney. Get it while you can, y'all. This is the You Didn't Get the Memo show. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching the You Didn't Get the Memo show with your inspirational host, Gloria Bailey Ray. It's your contributions that make this happen. To become a sponsor, send an email to youdidn'tgetthememo@gmail. That's the letter U, didn't get the memo. If you're not in a space to be a sponsor, but you like what you hear, we simply ask that you support what you like by making a contribution to the show. There are 3 ways to make an online donation. Visit paypal.me/Gloria Bailey Ray or Cash App or Venmo, Gloria Bailey Ray. Give what you can. Your support is appreciated.
All right. If you guys are just tuning in, we have been having a dynamic conversation with Dr. D. Haney. And we are just talking about what's going on within our education system. And Dr. Haney, actually sits on the Clayton County, School Board in Jonesboro, Georgia, and she's just sharing her expertise and her knowledge and what she knows. And I love, the interaction, guys. Thank you so much, because this is what this show is about, is to help you be informed and make informed decisions. Before we went to break, I posed this question to Dr. D, and it was just about, if the students should have a voice, or say so in what's going on in the schools, and if so, to what degree? Because what we're seeing now is a lot of students that aren't happy with things. They're walking out, they're protesting. So, what, in your opinion, are your thoughts about students having a voice, and if so, to what degree?
I'm glad you asked that question. That's a good question because in January this year, right before school, I had a forum for our students in a collaboration with our Solicitor General here. And so the forum was Stop the Violence. And of course, we put this program together where we wanted students to be able to express themselves. It wasn't us having a dictating type of forum. Now we had speakers, but I had them to limit their speaking to like 3 minutes because it was about the students. And we did this in collaboration with a contest, a video contest. And so on that, and it spoke on Dr. King, of course, with his nonviolence, because it was during his time of his birthday and all that. And so we had this forum. And so with that being said, those students not only express themselves through their arts, but they express themselves verbally. And so with that being said, I had students on the panel and the questions were posed to those students. And when those students eloquently expressed themselves without demeaning anyone or any school or any administrator, but when they were free to understand the space was there, brave space conversations and psychological safety was in place for them, and they were able to express themselves so openly. And that was a wake up call to us as adults, as us as administrators, as us as board members. It was a wake up call, even to some parents, and how these children had these particular emotions, situations, circumstances in their lives that they suppressed for so long. And then being able to express themselves and have the free will to do it without any judgment. The story, it was awesome. And so it just really showed that if we give them that voice without the judgment, without looking down on them, and to let them just have free will, and then do something about it and what they're talking about, then that they can see that. And fortunately, we had some middle school students. They saw that smoking weed wasn't a thing to do, but they expressed themselves as to how they would handle that if someone was to approach them.
Mhm.
They allow us themselves to be open to say, this is how I will handle it, Dr. D. I said, okay. Then I had some of my little elementary school babies saying something, and then I had my high schoolers, and some of them were juniors and some of them were seniors. And one of the seniors said, I just want to pass this along so that you all will know for the next group, the next class that comes about. So
Mm.
we allow that space for them to have that free will to speak. Conversations were going, the chat was blowing up. I was reading the chat. I'm trying to, facilitate, and I'm reading the chat, and I was like, this is what I'm talking about. And so we were able to extract that information from the chat. Those area superintendents got on board.
Right.
Those
Right.
councils got on board. And so those different departments seen that. So it doesn't matter who gets the credit. I'm not about who gets the credit. It's
Mm.
about let's get the work done.
Yeah.
And so when I saw that, I said, this is what they need. And so we're working together again. The Solicitor General now, we have some things stirring up as well in the future. As of now, we're just working some things out to let them get acclimated to school right now. And we're going to continue this. And I don't like one stop drops. This is going to be continuous. I want them to understand Dr. D is here. I serve you. I serve you. Not a matter of an elected official. I serve you. And I tell them that. And so I want them to understand, and just talking to them, going to their schools, they pull me to the side, we're talking. And as we say, they got me all hip hop. As we chop it up, that's what they say, we chop it up. I just get,
I love it.
you all have to know me to know me. I get gutted with them, and they like, but at the same time, the level of respect is there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
allowing them to have that voice, because you're told, don't you say nothing. Don't you say, but you have to keep your confidentiality and create that space to say it's between you and I. Because I'm extracting themes. I'm not looking at the name of the person. I'm not looking at the person. But I'm making sure, first of all, they're safe and making sure nothing infringes on them. At the same time, I'm going to address the need that they're talking about, especially when they keep saying it over and over within one sentence. And so that's what I'm
creating that
looking
safe
at.
space.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's
got to
what
create
you
the
did.
safe
You
space.
created that safe space. And I asked
Yeah.
that because, how things were back in the day are not the same things that we do today. I was talking with my niece, and one of the things that she was saying is how they were parented. She does not parent her children the same way because society, things have changed. And at the same time, children need to be heard as well. So that's really, really interesting to hear that. So let me see if I can get through a few more questions that I have for you. And guys, I see your comments and I'm going to get to them very quickly. So, Dr. D, why is it important for Black people to be represented on their local school boards? Because for me, growing up, of course, the school board was made up of all white people. And that's no knock, but I'm just saying that I always relate even more so because somebody that looks like me and talks like me and can relate to where I'm coming from, I feel like that I get more traction than someone who doesn't look like me and say, I don't know where you're talking about. I've not experienced that. So in your opinion, why do you think it's important to have Black representation on the school board?
It's very important, especially when you have a district that's predominantly African American. And we have a blended community here in Clayton. And so it's twofold to that. Some would say we have too much Blackness on the board. Because we do have one Caucasian on the board, and the remaining 8 are African American. So they'll say, oh, there's just too much Black on the board, right? And then that needs to be changed up, as they would say. But then again, you have that much Black on the board, but it shows that our students, hey, they can do it, I can do it. They look like me. And when they get to know your story, like I tell people, I ran in 2016, I didn't win, but when they understand the backdrop as to how I got to where I am now, that will should or hopefully would encourage them to pursue whatever they want to. So when you can relate to them in a manner to get on their level, and yes, you want to bring them up. And I had a conversation with a dear friend of mine here, and I get into it all the time. He's like, you always know you want to meet people on that level. You always want to help people to get up on another level. I do. But first of all, I got to get to the root first, and then we're gonna graduate to that level. Now I can get that part. Now I can channel over it and say, excuse me, I can get there. But at the same time, when I'm dealing with my community, they got to see who I really am. And so I think that when you have an all black, and we're just gonna say black, when you have an all black board, yeah, they can relate. And there are some personalities that may want to say they forget where they come from, but it's okay to not go there. But at the same time, remember your roots.
Right, right,
So
right.
that you can relate, because now you're working with an African American community, and you, me, for instance, know what the backdrop is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was fortunate to be raised in a two-parent household, but don't nobody know we had to eat church's chicken every Sunday because mom and dad had to take care of some bills. See, they don't know that part of it. So they just see the shine, but they don't know the dullness that came behind the shine. So I just look at that. So being able to be on a black board, first of all, you be relatable. Second of all, you're knowledgeable about it. And so
right.
sometimes you have to kill the stereotype and say they don't know what they're doing. They're gonna all agree. They're gonna swing this vote this way, right here. No, I have my own voice. They
That's
have their
right.
own voice. They got
That's
their
right.
own mind. But when people see that you can come together, because the stereotype is that all black people can't get along. Yes, we
Mhm.
can. But when you come together, what makes it so different and what's so diverse about it is everybody have their different ways of thinking and interpreting. At the end of
Mhm.
the day, we're gonna come together to make sure that this district moves in the direction it's supposed to
Right.
move into.
And
And
that's
that's not only with Clayton, that's with Atlanta, that's with any other, and Atlanta's beginning to be a little blended at this point. But when I was growing up, it was black. You had sprinkles of the whites. But because I came up in Atlanta and then went over to Fulton County. And so
mhm.
in Fulton County, it was nothing but whites, on the board. So I was
Mhm.
just like, really? But Fulton is so big, and I'm just like, well, so now it's like you said, the dynamics are shifting now.
Right,
So
right.
I look at that. And so when I go to conferences, I see majority African Americans that's representing these boards. I think it's vitally important because it first of all show that DE&I is just not a fad now. Because
Right.
it's
Come
a
on.
thing now. Everybody want to talk about DE&I. It's a thing now. But really, it's not the thing. The
Yeah.
thing is that we've always tried to get to that point, and now we've got to that.
Right,
So
right.
it just shows I try to do things to be an example for our children. That's what I think about.
Yeah.
That's why I have my mom say, remember your last name. Remember how you look when you go out in public. As a child, watch everything you do.
That's true. One quick comment, and I'm going to show you. Sometimes the adults think that they have all the answers without knowing what the younger generation is thinking or feeling, and you address that eloquently, and I appreciate that. But as much as I always hate these conversations that come to an end, I must ask Dr. D. What is it that you want the viewers who are watching the show today? What do you want them to take away?
I want you all, this is what I want us to do. It's not a matter of that pronoun you. What I want us to do is always stay involved with our school district. Whether you have children that are graduated, even if you don't have children, they are still part of the community. We can't say they're so bad, they don't know better, but can you help them get better? What part can you take enhance that child? And I just want us to stay involved, get involved, volunteer at the school, get involved with the PTA, just get involved with some of the resources that the schools are offering, the districts are offering. It takes nothing. If you can only go to the school when they have assemblies and they have the programs, help out the cheerleaders, do something, show your support. They need it. And even tutor if you can. Because 9 times out of 10, you have nieces and nephews that's going through something and you may not know it and they may be struggling as well. So just take that in perspective and say, my niece or nephew might be going through what they're going through. So I just want us to just come together, regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of our income, regardless of our status. Children are children. And yes, they are. That cliche, we are our future. Yeah, they are our present right now
Right.
because they can teach us some things that we never thought that we could probably learn, especially with these cell phones. They can teach us so much. So you'll learn a lot from a child. The Bible says that you learn a lot from a child, okay? So my thing is just get involved with that child and get involved with the school system. There's
Right.
so much that can be done.
Okay, so Dr. D, I don't want you to go anywhere. You hang tight, okay? I want to say to all of you guys, I want to thank you so much for being here with me. This has been like phenomenal. We have to have Dr. D back again because, as you can tell, she's just deep. It's just so much that it's a lot to try to cover in 55, 56 minutes. But I want to thank all of you guys for being here. I'm going to ask you to do something for me tonight. I'm going to ask each and every one of you to go on to my YouTube channel. I need you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I need you to like. You guys are here. You're with me. I'm one of the very few persons of color that's doing something that affects us. Please, guys, go to YouTube, like me, appreciate me, and look, I want you to set your clocks to every Tuesday, 5 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for always. I always have a dope show and with some dope guests on You Didn't Get the Memo. But until this time next week, I want to remind all of you that if you didn't take anything away from today's show, then it's really you who didn't get the memo. Be well, stay safe, pay it forward, and always give thanks because you know what? We could always have more, but we also could have less as well. God bless you all. I'm out. Be well.